Hola, clase de español uno. Es tiempo de hacer nuestro screencast. Okay, let's go ahead and begin for this week. Starting with section 5.1, kind of closing in on the end of semester here. We're only going to be getting through chapter 5 and a little bit of 6. Vocabulario y gramática, discussing how often you do things. So obviously you're going to have some different frequency words in here. Words like sometimes, never, always, every once in a while, every day. Things along those lines. Phrases like that. Let's go ahead and begin. A veces is sometimes. A veces. Ayudar en casa, to help out at home. Ayudar en casa. La chica, the girl. La chica. El chico, the boy. El chico. Con qué frecuencia? Generally translated means how often. Literal translation, with what frequency? Con qué frecuencia? Desayunar is to eat breakfast. Desayunar. Durante is during. Durante. Muchas veces. Often. Literally translated, many times. But often is its general translation. Muchas veces. Nada. Never. I'm sorry, nada is nothing. Nadie is nobody or no one. Nunca is never. Nunca. ¿Quiénes? Who or whom. ¿Quiénes? Notice there's not quiénes, but ¿quiénes? La semana, the week. Siempre, always. Siempre. Solo cuando, only when. Todavía means still or yet. Todavía. Todos los días means every day. The literal translation is all the days, but every day for todos los días. Tomar el autobús, to take the bus. Tomar el autobús. Here are a few sample sentences that use conjugations of some AR verbs, as well as some of our current frequency words and some other miscellaneous vocab from the last few chapters. First one asks, ¿Con qué frecuencia desayunas? How often do you eat breakfast? ¿Siempre organizas tu cuarto? Do you always clean up your room? ¿Y qué haces durante la semana? And what do you do during the week? ¿Todavía tocas la guitarra? Do you still play the guitar? Great general versus literal translation on this one. You have still, you play the guitar. So obviously word order changes when you're cleaning up language and you're cleaning up sentences. Desayuno todos los días. I have breakfast every day. Nunca organizo mi cuarto. I never organize my room. A veces cuido a mi hermano. Sometimes I take care of my little brother. Or I take care of my brother. Muchas veces ayudo en casa. Often I help at home. Sí, pero solo cuando no tengo tarea. Yes, but only when I don't have homework. That's in response to this question. ¿Todavía tocas la guitarra? Do you still play the guitar? Sí, pero solo cuando no tengo tarea. Yes, but only when not I have homework, or when I don't have homework. Está bien y super. Okay, so that's just a little bit of, those are some sample sentences. Here are some our vocabulary from this section. Let's go ahead and take a quick peek at some of our grammar that we'll be looking at for this week. And here we go. So obviously frequency words, negation, asking the question who or whom, and some review of verb conjugation is all important. Okay. In chapter 2, you learn how to make sentences negative by putting the word no in front of a verb. So to say never or not ever, you can put nunca before the verb. For example, nunca tomo el autobús. Never I take the bus. Or generally translated, I never take the bus. So in Spanish, you'll often use no and nunca, or no and nada, together in the same sentence. In that case, be sure to put no in front of the verb, and nunca or nada after the verb. So for example, no tomo el autobús nunca. which means I never take the bus. This is kind of interesting because in English we would call this a double negative, right? So no tomo el autobús nunca. I mean, I guess that would definitely translate to something like I don't never take the bus, which means I do take the bus, like always. It's different in Spanish. You're allowed to use double negatives. That's considered grammatically okay in the Spanish language. So kind of confusing a little bit. For example, los sábados no hago nada, which would literally translate on Saturdays, I don't do nothing, which is obviously incorrect in English. But on Saturdays, I don't do anything, as it's general translation. Skip it up here a little bit. Another negative word is nadie. It's always used with a singular verb form. For example, no toco la guitarra nadie. No toco la guitarra nadie. Nobody plays the guitar. Now, if I were just to say the word nadie toca la guitarra, like just take this negative word here and put it in front of the verb conjugation and leave out no, that would be acceptable also. You're saying almost the same thing. This probably speaks to your English sensibilities a little bit more. Nadie toca la guitarra. Nobody plays the guitar. That's a little bit more generally in line with our literal translation too. So some things to take note of. We're going to practice a lot of this information this week. Next. Okay, move this on down a little bit. You've already learned the question word quién, which asks who or whom. Quién is used to ask about one person, but when asking about more than one person at a time, you can use the phrase quiénes. Still asking who. Compare these two sentences below. We have quién es el chico rubio, who is the blonde boy. Then you have quiénes son las chicas rubias. Look at how much that changes. Quiénes asks who. Son instead of es, because who are, not who is. Las chicas as opposed to la chica, or in this case it was el chico. And then rubias. I'm making everything agree in gender and number here. So kind of interesting in that respect. Okay, quién versus quiénes. We'll be practicing that as well. And just a quick note, we've spent a lot of time the last several weeks on verb conjugation. In Chapter 4, in Section 4.1, we looked at conjugating AR verbs, knowing that the yo forms in an O, the tu forms in an AS, the el or ea usted forms in an A, amos, ice, and on, respectively. And then in Section 4.2, we looked at the verb estar, which means to be in terms of location. So estoy, estás, está, estamos, estáis, están. I am, you are, he or she is, or you formal are. Estamos, we are. Estáis, you all are. Están is like you all formal are, or they are. And then the verb ir, to go or to be going. Voy, vas, va, vamos, vais, van. I go, you go, he or she goes, we go, you all go, they go. That sort of thing. Now here's what's interesting about this. Estar is considered slightly irregular because it has an OY ending instead of an O ending. And it also has accents over the second person, third person, and also third person plural. Ir is, you'll notice, is conjugated almost the same way. Hoy, as, a, amos, aisan. So it's a lot like estar minus the accents. And it's also very similar to regular AR verbs. But again, it's not an AR verb. It's the verb ir. It doesn't even have a root or a stem, and at the same time, there's no V anywhere in there too. So there's a lot going on. But all regular AR verbs and the verb ir and the verb estar all have a very similar pattern. And so that's why I grouped them together here in this slide, is so that you could note that pattern. Notice that all of them end in on at the bottom. All of them end in ice. All of them end in amos, as, and oi, and o. So, but they all do have an o present as well. So those are things to keep in mind, be mindful of. And while we're on this topic of verbs and verb conjugation, being able to conjugate verbs, here's your extra credit for this week. Come to class ready to conjugate the verb estar and the verb ir and any AR verb that we've learned in all of Chapter 4. And just let me know if you're ready to do it, because if you are, I'll quiz you for a minute. I'll say things like, okay, using the verb hablar, say I speak, and you'd say yo hablo. Okay, they speak, ellos hablan. We speak, nosotros hablamos. Okay, how would you say I am. Then you'd have to say estoy. Okay, we are, estamos. Okay, they are, ellos están. Okay, ¿cómo se dice? How would you say you're going? Well, tú vas. She goes, ella va. I go, yo voy. And so you would have to be able to interact with me calling from any one of our AR verbs plus the verb ir plus the verb estar. It's quite a tall order. I think that a lot of you probably could do this. I could end up giving out way too much extra credit on this one if I have a lot of good students who have all their vocabulary memorized and who really know how to conjugate well. If that's the case, I have no problems with it. Let's see how you do. That's your challenge. Have a great weekend. Learn lots. Ciao y hasta luego.